Okay, so you've done the hard work. You've built and deployed your AI model. But is it a secure asset, or is it just a vulnerable target waiting for an attack? In this explainer, we're not just talking about security, we're building a fortress. We're going to walk through 5 essential steps to harden your AI, turning it from a liability into a genuine stronghold.
So let's start with a really direct question. I want you to think about this honestly. Is your AI model basically an open house with all the doors unlocked? It's a stark metaphor, I know, but for a whole lot of deployed models out there, it's way closer to the truth than you might think.
And hey, if you think I'm being a little dramatic, get a load of this number. A 2023 Microsoft security report, this is recent stuff, found that a staggering 60% of production AI models have at least one critical vulnerability. That's more than half the models out there, right now, just exposed.
But, okay, don't panic. Here's the really good news. Most of these successful attacks, they aren't some super sophisticated movie-style hacks. Nope. They exploit really basic security oversights, things we can fix. And by fixing just these fundamentals, you can put yourself ahead of 80% of other AI deployments. A little effort here goes a very, very long way.
All right, let's start laying the foundation for our fortress. Step 1 is something called adversarial training. This is all about building a model that's resilient from the inside out.
The best way to think about adversarial training is like a vaccine for your AI. Seriously, you are intentionally and proactively exposing your model to simulated attacks while it's still learning. Just like a vaccine teaches your immune system to spot a virus, this process teaches your model to recognize and fight off malicious inputs when it sees them in the wild.
So how do you actually do this? Well, you can start with a method like the fast gradient sign method, or FGSM for short. It basically just subtly tweaks input data to try and trick the model. And you don't have to build it from scratch. Open source libraries like Cleverhands and Foolbox make this super accessible. A good rule of thumb? Just add about 10 to 20% of these adversarial examples to your training data. Yeah, it'll slow down the training a bit, but the security payoff is absolutely immense.
Okay, so that's our internal immune system. Now for our second layer of defense. Input sanitization. Think of this as the gatekeeper at the front door of your fortress.
We're talking about a bouncer for your model. Imagine your AI as an exclusive club. Input sanitization is that person at the velvet rope, checking every single piece of data to make sure it's legit and safe before it ever gets near your model. Nothing gets past this checkpoint without being validated. Period.
And this bouncer has a strict 4-point checklist. First up, validate data types. Don't just trust a file extension that says .jpg. Make sure it's actually an image. Second, check value ranges. Stop attackers from using crazy extreme values to break things. Third, normalize all your formats. This prevents hidden malicious code. And fourth, you gotta have rate limiting. Come on, 1,000 requests a second from one user? That's not a user, that's an attack. Shut it down.
Now for step 3, model obfuscation. This is all about protecting the crown jewels, the model itself. The goal here is to make your model a completely useless prize, even if an attacker manages to get their hands on it. The philosophy here is really simple. A breach of your perimeter defenses doesn't have to mean game over. If an attacker gets inside, but all they find is a complex, encrypted, totally unintelligible asset, well, their attack has pretty much failed, hasn't it?
So here are the tools for the job. You can encrypt the model's weights using standards like AES-256. You can watermark it with unique identifiers, kind of like invisible ink, to prove it's yours if it ever gets stolen. You could use a technique called knowledge distillation to share a less precise version of the model while keeping the original safe. And for the ultimate protection, run it in a secure enclave using confidential computing. Okay, on to step 4, continuous monitoring. Because, let's be real, security is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You need a 24/7 security team watching the walls of your fortress.
Continuous monitoring is your automated, always-on, vigilant security detail. It's constantly watching for anything weird. You remember Microsoft's Tay chatbot, right? It took them 16 hours to notice it had been compromised and was just spewing toxic stuff everywhere. Proper monitoring could have flagged that within minutes.
So what are you actually looking for? Well, keep your eyes on 4 key signals. 1. Prediction drift. That's when your model's answers suddenly start to change. 2. A drop in confidence scores. Your model suddenly gets really uncertain. 3. Weird new patterns in the input data. And finally, 4. Unexpected spikes in resource usage, CPU, memory, you name it. That can be a dead giveaway of a model extraction attack.
And that brings us to our final pillar, regular security audits. This is where we shift from just playing defense to playing offense. You're now actively trying to break into your own fortress to find the weak spots before someone else does.
You know, this insight is so critical. Complacency is the real enemy. The companies that get breached aren't always the ones with weak security. They're the ones who set up a plan 5 years ago and never, ever looked at it again. And in the world of AI, the threat landscape changes incredibly fast.
So here's a simple checklist to get you started. Conduct penetration testing every single quarter. Get other developers to review your code, especially that boilerplate stuff where vulnerabilities just love to hide. Use automated tools to scan all your dependencies for known issues. And please, constantly update your threat model to stay current with what's going on out there.
So, after all that, what's the result? Let's look at the transformation. You've gone from an open house to a fortress. From being vulnerable to being resistant. From a stealable object to an encrypted and watermarked asset. From being totally blind to threats to having a 24/7 monitoring system with alerts. You've turned a potential liability into a truly secure asset.
So let's recap those 5 pillars one last time, nice and quick. Adversarial training builds internal resistance. Input sanitization guards the gates. Model obfuscation protects the crown jewels. Continuous monitoring watches the walls. And regular auditing proactively finds and fixes any cracks in those walls.
And that really brings us to the final question, the one you need to take away from all this. You've done the hard work of building your AI. Now I want you to take a hard look at it through this lens. Is it a fortress or is it still a target?